great, we just saddle ourselves with another unplayable contract. That sucks because
That's just like a lot of thoughts, Will.
yeah.
And the Wolves come down, run an action to get an open three off of movement or pull up threes off of miscommunications on those switches. Like that was an issue. But you get these. That's the thing, is you get these flashes of how good Jamal can be.
Yeah.
And you're like, dude, like we should create a meter for this, for how Will feels about Jamal.
I'm on the first notch of this worry meter. They're like, yeah, sure, Christian, you take the ball, shoot a three or drive, or let's see what you can do. You're not established yet as a starter. And he's answered that very well, because I'm loving watching CB, for the record. I think it's so fun. Welcome back to What's in a Game. I'm Will Jones, here as always with my co-host, Grace Jean. How you doing, Grace?
I'm good. I'm basking in the glow of daylight savings time ending, so...
I thought you were going to say the win against the Raptors.
Oh, yeah, that was...
the Jazz.
Yeah, that was great too, I guess. But it's the Jazz.
I know.
They needed that win.
They did. They needed the get-right game, but it is hard to know when the Jazz is so bad. What else could they have done besides what they did? So, can't ask for more.
We saw how they looked versus the Raptors and the Nets, so... All right, well, do you want to jump into actually talking about the Nuggets' early season stumbles and maybe how they're starting to figure some things out?
Yeah, so we haven't talked about the Nuggets or had an episode since the home opener versus the Thunder. We played 5 games since then. We're now 3-3. We won 2 overtime games on the road on back-to-backs, which was surprising in some senses because we looked to struggle in those games, specifically the bench, as well as MPJ being in a slump and Jamal's shooting not being there. Thankfully, lately, MPJ's shot has been improving and looking better, and so we could maybe theoretically just chalk that up to he was slumping again to start of the season, and now he's looking pretty good, and hopefully that continues. AG's shot has looked really good. Christian Braun has looked good with the starters, but the bench and the rotations with the bench in terms of whether you're playing just Murray with them or Murray and MPJ with them hasn't worked at all. And they are losing leads quickly in these games, and the starters are having to play a lot of minutes. Jokić is having to produce a ton to win these games. That's pretty much the quick summary of where we stand right now.
Yeah, I mean, you basically talked about the things that have looked like really good about the team through the first 6 games, even in their losses. Like something in particular like we have to talk about is that Jokić looks amazing as a scorer from all 3 levels, frankly.
I know.
3-point shot looks like it's back. I think that his form looks slightly modified, particularly from his base. But I think the thing that's probably standing out most to people is his lack of hesitation on that shot.
Yeah, he's going to it.
So that was unfortunately in a loss to the Clippers. He had 7 threes in that game. But this tweet from Jake Coyne at the Stat Squatch, great account to follow for stats about the team and such, really stood out to me. He says, in NBA history, only one player in their entire career has had all 3 of a 25 point, 15 rebound, 15 assist game, a game with 40 points or more on 1 or fewer made free throws, and a game with 7 or more made threes. That one player is Nikola Jokić, and he did them all in the first, I believe, 3 games of the season. Maybe it was the first 4 games. He had 2 back-to-back 40-point games. The first one was against the Clippers, which included the 7 threes. Then he had another one versus the Raptors, which went to overtime.
Thankfully, we won one of those, because if we lost 2 back-to-back 40-point games from Jokić, I don't know. The world would be on fire right now. So
that stat about Jokić 40-point games being L's for the Nuggets is actually like really starting to pile up.
Yeah, which I mean, it makes sense because it's like if he is having to do that, that means someone's struggling.
Or everyone's struggling.
Yeah.
But he's just been amazing. I do think the playmaking hasn't stood out as much, but that's in part because guys are still trying, other guys in the team are still trying to find their spots. Yep. Early on, like guys were also not hitting shots, but there's no this or that. I will say he had some frustration outlet passes in the game versus the Jazz yesterday. Like there's one where he's like a sideline out of bounds, and he's like begging the ref to like give me the ball like right now, right now. And I thought he was going to inbound it to Russ, who's like waiting there, but he just like heaves it over
Chucked
to
it.
MPJ right behind the line, and thankfully MPJ cashed that. So that's just another one of those. And he had another one of those like outlet lobs to AG. Um, we can talk a little bit more about the Jazz game in particular because it's their first like bit like win by like double digits. Um, he it was like an outlet entry pass to AG in the post. Like he was behind half court line. And Jokic just like, I'm just like, he was clearly so over that game.
Yeah, he wanted a
Um,
rest.
it was a back to back. He wasn't getting the whistle that he wanted. He was clearly frustrated. But he finished that game, I believe it was a plus 31. Malone kept him in for the entire third quarter, presumably to try to drive the lead up so that the bench would have a lead to play with. And they thankfully not only held it, but were able to extend it slightly. So I think they came in with a 24-point lead. Anyway, yeah, Jokic was frustrated during the Jazz game, but he's been amazing. Like he should be frustrated. Like I'm sure, honestly, if Jokic read an article that was framing it as like, if the Nuggets wasting Jokic's prime, are they letting him down? I wouldn't blame him
Yes.
for kind of feeling that way.
I know.
They have really struggled, obviously, with Jokic off the floor. But something that I really want to draw attention to is the issues that the Nuggets have had in some of their limited, staggered minutes with Jokic. One of the things that really stood out in the first two games of the season was how the bench was coming in either with the, like when it's full bench, like no Jokic, or not full bench, but just no Jokic. Because sometimes like Malone has been staggering some of the starters more. They've been coming in with very tiny leads, and it's not the starters. That's the thing, is that the starting lineup, so Christian Braun, Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon, Nikola Jokic, they have a better net rating than the starting lineup last year. They're a plus 18.9 points per 100 possessions. And this is not necessarily going to hold the whole
Yeah.
season, but just as a story of the first 6 games. So it's like, well, yeah, they've always had a bad bench. So like, why have these first few games felt different? One of the things that immediately stood out to me were those minutes whenever it was like a Jamal staggering. So he's going to come off the floor and either Russ comes in or like Malone to start bringing in Julian. The last several games, he's been staggering like Julian in for MPJ, or you bring in PWat in for AG with Russ and all of that. So it's like Jokic plus bench players that comes in before the end of his first stint. In the past, they were winning those minutes because it's like Jokic versus benches. And even if he has bench players instead of starters with him, it's Jokic versus benches. And they've been kind of rolling in those minutes. Not so much in the first few games of the season. They were actually losing those minutes just outright in the first couple games. And that has sort of flipped a little bit. It's part of the reason that I think it was 3 games in, Jamal actually had the best on off of anybody on the court because or anybody on the team, because Russ's minutes were so bad. And it wasn't just the Russ with bench minutes, it was the Russ with Jokic minutes.
Mm-hmm.
But we have seen that start to turn around in the last, I would say, 3 games. I couldn't tell you the exact reason for that, besides guys are starting to gel a little bit more. Like you mentioned at the beginning of the show, Malone has been playing around with some different staggers. Game 1, he's staggering Jamal again. It's a disaster. I don't even remember if Malone goes back to that in the second half, to be honest. But by game 2, not doing that anymore. They're staggering MPJ. So he's actually the first sub in the game. And like I said, Julian comes in for him, and it's Julian with the starters. That look, even, I think we saw it in the game versus the Clippers. I noted it because that was one of the lineups that I wanted to see, where it wasn't Julian with the starters, but Malone subs out Jamal and Christian Braun for Russ and Julian. That's like an explicit thing that I wanted to see happen. And they got like boat raced in those minutes.
Hmm.
That first game that they did it versus the Clippers, a lot better in the second half. Malone like sticks with it and they just like try to do some different things. Part of the reason for that being worse than I thought it would be is because of Julian's defense, to be
Yeah.
completely honest. When you have Julian at the 2 and then it's Michael MPJ at the 4 or at the 3 and then AG and Jokić, you think like, okay, you got Russ there to have like some POA defense and then you got AG on the back line. It was really rough actually because of the defense of Julian and MPJ. In particular, their on-ball defense, and then MPJ still has his off-ball lapses at times. That's something that has definitely been a really big disappointment for me to start the season with MPJ in particular. His offense, like, okay, he's like struggling. He's not looking as like decisive as he did in the preseason, all of that. He has started to catch a rhythm in the last 2 games, but before that, it was looking really rough, like not strong with the ball coming off of handoffs, all these issues offensively, but defensively has been just honestly a nightmare. Blow bys, on ball, not getting around screens, not recovering once you get around the screen, losing guys off ball. Even though the offense has started to find itself a bit in the last, like I said, 2 games, to starting with the Wolves game and then yesterday versus the Jazz, the defense is still concerning because I'm like concerning in that it needs to be better. And I'm not even talking about being amazing because I don't think he was amazing defensively last year, but he wasn't this bad.
I don't know if he was worried about his offense, his like slump, and he's kind of down, and therefore not giving the energy on defense, or what's going on. But yeah,
Well, that's worse.
the perimeter
Oh,
defense is just
generally.
left, and
Okay.
just
Yeah.
like with the blow bys and just just not being able to contain anyone and just leaving. That's leaving so many threes open too. We talked about the switching with Swipa.
They're switching a lot.
Yeah,
That was an issue at the end of the Wolves game. We'll probably
right.
include a couple of clips from that where, they go up, get like a good lead, not a comfortable lead. They start playing their prevent offense, which I hate especially because of how early they started doing it. Then the Wolves come down, run an action to get an open 3 off of movement or pull up 3s off of miscommunications on those switches. Like that was an issue. That's like they need to clean it up thing. This is everybody. It was MPJ, it was Christian, it was Russ that were struggling to communicate on these switches and like get them right. And they are switching more, so that is a like issue that they need to solve.
Yeah. I think I was just surprised on both sides, like you said, with the communication on the defense, which I get that defenses, I mean, it takes reps to know tendencies on both sides. So I should have expected this a little bit more because you see like Jamal and AG miscommunicate even on a switch or
it's literally everybody.
yeah, it's everybody. And it's on offense too, where like in the Clippers game, thought the offense was super stagnant. There was like no motion. It was just going to these really base looks, like whether it's just a post up or a simple Jamal trying to get to an elbow jumper or a step back 3 or Mike going to a step back 3. And by the time they had done that in the first quarter, we were down to the Clippers.
We were down to almost every team that we played early.
Yeah, so far,
I
except
think
for the Jazz.
The Jazz game and the Wolves game, that was, even though it was a loss, we can talk about that a bit.
Yeah.
I think it was a turning point for the team. Hopefully that continues. But
yeah, a lot of my commentary, I've been more positive on the Nuggets, I think, on Twitter, just like, hey, like I even though the bench looks really bad, I feel like the starters are really good and are starting to even just look like themselves a little bit more. They're getting more used to Christian. MPJ's shot is steadily going up. I know he wasn't great tonight, but it's looking a little better. And against the Jazz, obviously, it was a very easy team. They looked what we'd want them to look like. It's just we want them to look like that all the time, even against tough defenses. But I do like that there's like progression, and AG's shot is so good. I already said that. Jokić is playing like an MVP again. It's amazing what he's doing. It's hard to like fully appreciate Jokić doing all this when it's like these games are so close and we're always playing from behind, and you're frustrated at the bench for giving up the work that the starters are doing and winning those minutes and then coming in and losing their minutes. Mike even said it after the Jazz game that it's just going to take time to learn tendencies, and they're getting more used to Christian in the starting lineup. He mentioned that Russ is still getting used to playing with whoever he's playing with, whether it's the starters or the bench. And Russ is going to be Russ all the time. So that's been a bit of a mixed bag. We're slowly going up, and hopefully on the defensive end, which Malone has already said he liked the defense, but I was kind of confused by that. I didn't like particularly love the defense, so I didn't really get that one, but
It's interesting because in the first 2 games, I know they gave up a lot of open threes, but there were a lot of like high level, high pressure, just good rotations and like for stretches of the first 2 games, which were losses to OKC and the Clippers. But they were struggling offensively, and it wasn't just hitting shots, like they just looked really discombobulated on offense. Then the Raptors game comes along. They're starting to look better on offense, but like the defense is just atrocious. That was the game where I was like, there's like everyone has been blown by like 5 or 6 times by a different Raptor. Getting blown by and then allowing open threes, like we saw in the preseason, being a bigger issue. Same thing in the Nets game. I thought that the defense was better versus the Wolves in terms of like containment, but the communication on those switches was a problem, which led to lots of threes. It was really throughout the game, but then you really saw it accelerate in the clutch. Which is like, okay, that's just another layer of issues that they need to solve. And we saw this in the title year where they were talking about after games at the beginning of the season when they were like a really good offense. I don't even think they were like a top 5 offense. They didn't even finish top 5 that year, but they were really good offense. But they were like, I believe at the time of that Portland Trailblazers game where Jamal hits that game winning shot, they were like 22nd on defense.
yeah.
It was not pretty. And they talked about after those games early in the season, like we're still like learning each other, and like things like communication even are an issue. Timing on switches, like knowing when, like if I call black, which is like what they use to call for switches, you need to jump out now. Or is it like a second from now? Or like, am I not calling it early enough? Or like, I think it's the right time, but I know that this guy takes like a half step to like jump out, like that kind of thing. But the containment has looked better.
I agree.
I will say that MPJ still needs to work on that because
As always, yeah.
like even just get back to where you were last year and I'll be okay, man. Like just in that regard.
I wondered if some of the early struggles or awkwardness was just purely CB being in the starting lineup, because obviously he's not on the bench anymore. He's with the starters, so that's going to affect both units.
Yep.
And I was worried about the spacing. He had a good scoring game in the first game, but I was worried that it was because teams are, going to let him try and beat them. They're like, yeah, sure, Christian, you take the ball, shoot a 3 or drive, or let's see what you can do.
Right.
Because, you're not established yet as a starter. And he's answered that pretty well, if not very well, because I'm loving watching CB, for the record. I think it's so fun. But you start to worry in the back of your mind whether just the idea that he's not like a established spacer is going to affect everyone else.
Right.
Like they're all clogged up in the paint, so they're just passing out to Christian. It's like we want the ball to be in Mike's hands or Jamal's or Jokić more than Christian's, despite Christian looking so good. So I was like, is this like actually a bad sign that Christian's scoring a lot? But it's looked better. He's
as
making
time has gone on,
as each game, and that worry has started to go down a bit, and he's hitting his 3, which I'm loving. I hope that keeps up. AG is also hitting his 3, so that helps, even because if people were the worst case scenarios, AG can't space and CB can't space, but they're both like hitting some 3s, and if Mike and Jamal can get into it, then it's like a lot of our worries will be okay, even with us having a pretty low 3-point frequency right now.
Right. No, I agree on that. And I had the same concerns watching Christian the first few games because teams were leaving him open. Like he was getting wide open driving lanes like to the basket. Something I really like is how strongly he's going to the basket. I do think some teams have like paid attention to the scouting report and they're trying to force him to his left hand a little bit more, but you can't do that all the time. And like because of the way that the Nuggets play, where they basically put every guy on the floor within different positions in all of these different actions. You just never know like who's going to be the guy doing X, Y, or Z, being set up to shoot, to drive, to pass the lob, to catch the lob. So even if it's effective here and there, they can't do it for entire games. So I'm less worried about that for the regular season. But he has just looked better. And the fact that he is able to space now, there was a nice possession in the Jazz game where he actually lifts from the corner after Russ kicks out to AG and AG passes it to him above the break for the three. So he's learning to like where to be.
Yeah, like
I
the
don't
court
think that was
mapping.
happening in the first couple of games. Even on the open shots he was getting, it's not because he was like moving to know like where to be to like
Yeah,
open
he
that
was just kind of
passing
standing
angle.
there and get the ball and then shoot or drive. Yeah.
Yes. I like how aggressive he's looked as a driver. Like he's looking at the basket now, like very good. It's really like the complete opposite of what we saw in the preseason. So I'm happy with his performance so far offensively. I will say his on-ball defense has not been as good to start the season. And it's not just because of the fact that so he's not as good of a screen navigator as KCP, and I suspect that that's the main reason why the team is switching a lot more in the starting lineup. Like we talked about this with Swipe, but they do like to switch a lot 1 through 4, especially at the end of games. They've been doing it throughout games now. And part of the problem with that is that Christian can't stay attached to like the really good player that he's trying to stay attached to. But the nice thing about switching, and we saw some possessions of it in the Jazz. We've seen like flashes of the team being able to be good at this defense throughout really each game. But they were able to force a shot clock violation because switching just kind of mucks everything up for the other team.
You just have to hold up, you know?
Just takes away from what they're trying to do, gets them deep in the shot clock, and then you can get creative from there, right? Even on ball, Christian has allowed more blow-bys.
Seemed like he's doing, sorry to interrupt, but he's doing like he's coming from behind, like just following and getting some blocks or trying to disrupt because he's
right,
kind of,
but he's not Peyton. Like he
Yeah.
doesn't have that wingspan. I don't know what
It's a
he's trying to
different
do
look.
there. It is a different look. There have been some times where it's like just taking it into in combination with the switching. I miss his off-ball defense because he's a really good help defender, and he has had some possessions of that when, like, say, Julian gets cross-matched onto a guy and Christian is able to come over and help with a block. He actually has really good timing on that too. Like we give and have given Peyton a lot of praise for his timing on blocks. Hasn't been as good this season. We'll talk about that. But Christian can be a really good help defender too. So that's like an advantage in that sense. But it's odd because we worried about the starters' offense. Maybe some people also worried about the defense, but I was less worried about it. But so far this year, the starters have had a substantially better offense and a worse defense. We'll see what holds up as the season goes on.
I wonder if part of it is, he used to be on the bench. So you're guarding like an ant for much less. But you can put him in there in spurts like we used to see, and he does a pretty good job on ant. And the thing about Christian is he has a huge motor. He's young, he's fast, he's really strong. So he's going to bring that like adrenaline and like relish the challenge of it. But it's like
we
now
definitely saw we saw the adrenaline from Christian in the game versus the Wolves.
The Wolves, yeah, with that great dunk on Gobert. I'm trying not to directly compare him to KCP all the time, even though it's like
right. I'm just saying like
what
looks different from last year and why.
Yeah, no, that's what my point I wanted to get to is like we can say he's either fully fulfilled KCP's absence in a way where it's like he's scoring, he's defending, maybe not as well with like the quicker guards. He's, so that is a concern, I think. But, he's held up well.
He was getting cooked by Dennis Schroeder.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
So it's like
that was tough. But he was good on Cam Thomas.
Yeah, exactly. And that was a back-to-back. So I don't know if that had anything to do with it. But I think in general, that's going to be something that like his archetype was always that he could guard like wings or like some more skilled bigger guards like Ant, who's like driving aggressively, and KCP was like a chasing Steph around screens guy. So that is to my point, is that he's just a different look on offense and defense than KCP. He's making up for it in different ways. So it's not like he's like better in some ways. Maybe the net rating's better, but it's just a different look and it still works. So that's what I'm happy about.
Yeah.
As long as like the spacing doesn't get bogged down and all that. So right now it's good and I'm loving CB in the starting unit. I hope we can get through this whole season. He's at the same level and consistent, and we can just like enjoy that, and he can be an established starter in the league for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I said is that it's like 15th on the list of things that are questions the Nuggets need to answer this season. But one of the things is Christian being able to keep up hit all of this, like the motor and the just overall impact and production, playing starter level minutes.
Yeah,
for
the grind.
82 game season, and hopefully, even longer than that if they make a deep playoff run. So actually, as you mentioned, the Wolves and Ant, this is something I wanted to bring some people's attention to. So Minnesota was a team that they're like this relentless, like drive and kick basketball team for the most part, right? And you could see why with the skill that Ant has at getting to the paint, getting to the basket, collapsing a defense, and all of that. But their offense looked very different to me in that game. We talked about the miscommunications on some switches leading to some threes, but I wasn't really like a fan of like the overall process from Minnesota in that game. They did win, obviously, and were able to score because they were able to capitalize on some of those mistakes from Denver. But one of the things that was really difficult for the Nuggets to deal with the Wolves last season was just Ant. No one could stay in front of him. In this game, Ant was like relentless about taking threes. He's averaging over 12 attempts per game this season.
He was 7 of 14 in that game.
Yeah, he took 14 in that game, and he really wanted to take them. So like that was just a thing. It's hard to contest a guy when you're playing him for the drive. So he's benefiting from having like relatively clean looks as well. The Wolves as a team, their 3-point rate has completely skyrocketed. Now you're wondering like, well, are all teams even playing like the way that they're going to play this season? So one of the things I was looking at is this cool chart from Hoop Informatics, who took some data from Krishna Narsu on Twitter, great follow for NBA analytics stuff, about which stats that you can take from a certain game at the beginning of the season will be representative of where the team is going to be as a whole for the whole season. And it turns out that 3-point attempt rate is one of the stats that starts becoming like, okay, this is what the team's going to be within the first 5 or 6 games of the season. And so it was interesting to me that the Wolves were taking so many threes and generating them with like no paint touch threes. Like a lot of them were off of movement or Ant pull up threes. They also had some catch and shoots, but that wasn't the primary mode by which they were generating them. But the Wolves have jumped from 17th in 3-point attempt rate to 2nd this season as of right now.
Well, yeah, so that could hold up maybe.
So that might actually hold up, and that could be like, oh, is that scary? Maybe. I think that a great defensive team that takes a lot of threes is actually like a pretty good formula, because if you're not a great offense, you try to find other ways to kind of make up that margin. Like, we don't have great process, but we're going to try to like figure out like some ways to generate a good enough high value shot. So that I think is interesting about the Wolves, but it got me thinking about like, okay, what are the stats about the Nuggets that we can actually glean from the early stages of this season? So there were 3 stats that really stood out based on this chart, this analytics chart, that you can actually take like, this is what the team is going to be starting from around game 5 or 6 of the season. And those were pace, 3-point rate, and free throw rate. the Nuggets are actually 17th in pace right now, which doesn't sound impressive, but they were 27th last year.
Yeah. So definitely an improvement with Russ, and I think also CB contributing a little bit to that, and
Yes.
whatever else. Yeah.
I do think that Christian has been pushing pace. It helps that he like rebounds the ball a lot. Like sometimes he'll just like take it and then toss it into whoever. But if he has it, or if he's like getting a steal, like he's darting down the floor with that, and I love to see that.
Yeah.
We were letting teams off the hook a lot when it came to transition last season. The other,
Hmm.
this is a pace related stat, but it's like how long are your offensive possessions? And the Nuggets are actually 5th in pace of offensive possession right now, which is wild because they were
Hmm.
27th last year. So when you think about like the teams that are at the very top of that stat, or like you could look at it as a bad thing. Easy ways to look at it as a bad thing, like they're just taking bad shots quickly early in the clock. Some of the other team, it's not necessarily like a 1-to-1. Like you will have a great offense if you work fast. But there are other teams here that you would expect to see in the top 10: the Pacers, the Kings, the Warriors, some other teams that have substantially jumped up their pace that surprised me were the Cavs, actually, and the Bulls. Um, but it's interesting to see the Nuggets there when it comes to this stat, because it according to these analytics can be very predictive of how the rest of the season is going to go. What are your thoughts about that?
I think it's a good thing. I mean, you saw the Wolves almost take advantage of the slow pace again, where it's like a compounding issue of pressuring the
Yep.
ball so much that the Nuggets couldn't even get to run their half court offense till like
Yep.
late in the shot clock. And then you're getting a really bad shot instead of, that's probably going to be a worse shot than forcing something quickly and then going into a shot, I would think. But I guess
Or
you
even
could,
just getting into your set sooner.
yeah.
Because they were trying to run prevent offense when they were barely up. It was just dumb stuff all around. Lots of things to talk about for the end of that Wolves game, but
We know Jokic stereotypically as being a slower player, someone who makes the game conform to his own pace. So he's theoretically fine playing at whatever pace that he's comfortable in, whether that's slower or not. But I think that there are tactical advantages worth increasing the pace so that we're in the half court quicker and running the sets quicker. Because then you just have more time on the shot clock for Jokic to operate, or whoever else. If the offense is more creative and moving and there's movement in multiple actions, I think that's going to benefit the Nuggets, because I think we can be good when we are doing that. It's just you don't want to,
always do that
and
and let defenses off the hook, which is what they
yeah,
were doing at the
and
end of
you
that game.
you want to get easier looks too if you can push the pace a bit. And I think, yeah, we already talked about Christian. His rim finishing is looking amazing. He can dunk it easier on the fast break than KCP. I'm sorry, KCP. I'm trying not to compare again, but we were so frustrated with the KCP transition smoked layups, and he had like one dunk that was pretty exciting last year. But CB,
He
that's
had
just going to be a
multiple
weapon for
dunks
him. Yeah, I guess so. I just like one sticking out of my mind that was like, whoa, I didn't know you
in the
had that one,
playoffs. Yeah.
KCP. Yeah, against the Lakers. But
Yeah.
17th in pace is probably where you want him to be in some way, because it's like you don't want to be so fast with Jokic,
Yeah.
but you don't want to be last.
Yeah, for sure. And like the fastest teams aren't necessarily the best teams either. I remember the Wizards were like top of the league in pace last year, and
Hmm.
they're third right now at this point in the
Hmm.
season. The Bulls are first. You don't necessarily want to be in that company, but when it comes to things like if you dig into it more, offensive pace of possession being that high tells me that they're trying to get into things faster on offense. The other thing that's pace related, actually, since we're on it, is defensive, like length of possession. The Nuggets are strangling pace on the defensive end. And that I think has to do with the fact that they are switching so much. They're really mucking the game up for teams that like are trying to run an action. They were actually 18th last year, which is not bad in that sense. It just kind of goes along with the way that they defend. Even when they weren't switching as much last year, a lot of the strategy on defense is to force the opposing offense to get deep into the clock and have to take tougher shots.
Yeah,
Even
we're
if you
seeing a
get a
little bit
good
more.
shot, if you're getting it near the end of the clock, there's a more pressure on it, all of that stuff, right? It's one of the reasons that they ended up being a top 10 defense by the end of last year. So I find that also interesting that they have been able, they're the best team at strangling pace at the moment.
Yeah, it's pretty
Um,
surprising.
and there are some other like good teams in this range as well. I'm going to do a whole thread because I did this with offense because there are different ways to create elite offense. But I'm really curious about how the best defenses in the league, which the Nuggets are not currently, I'm not arguing that at all. They're like 17th in defensive rating, but that's not a stat that you can necessarily take for the rest of the season yet. We need to get a bit more data, get closer to like 15 games into the season for that to be predictive. But it's interesting to me the ways that different elite defenses try to, create the outcome of being an elite defense as well. Oh, the last one was free throw rate. If you want to talk about that one, Will.
Yeah, I mean, we know that the Nuggets are a lower free throw rate team, don't get to the line a ton. For whatever reason, whether you think it's a ref conspiracy or just the fact that Jamal takes a lot of in-range shots and Jokić is a floater god. They're
I thought you were going to
stylistic.
call him a floater merchant.
No, I mean, yeah, it's just like a stylistic thing. I think Jokic could get more calls based on the contact, but he's a big guy, so you don't necessarily
Absolutely.
get that.
Well, there's other
Um,
big guys that get the calls, but
well,
whatever.
yes, but he doesn't grift enough. That's oh god, this is bringing me flashbacks to last season about grifting and how mad I was about that. But in Booth and Malone's mind, I know Malone brought it up in the media day was CB and PWat generating more free throws. I think even Russ is someone who could maybe do that a bit. He tries to do
I
that.
think he does, right? In that
Yeah, he
22
does.
point game that he had, I think like half of them were on free throws.
Yeah,
He not only got the attempts, but he actually made them, which was nice.
he definitely tries to get fouls more than I'm used to seeing Nuggets players try to get fouls, which is can be frustrating because when he doesn't get it, then it's like a turnover. So
So they're currently eighth in free throw rate this season. And last year they were 25th.
whoa. So this
So
really, if this is a stat that could hold up, that would be amazing for the
right,
Nuggets.
because that's another aspect of, we had this really great discussion with Matt Moore about the issues that the Nuggets have with the math game, and seeing now that they are still 30th in 3-point rate tells us that probably that's not going to change. They were 30th last season as well. They were not 30th in the title year. I will just say that. But free throws are another way that you can make up that disparity. We see that a lot when it comes to the Lakers being a team that is like they're like reliant on free throws because they just like they're not like a super efficient 3-point shooting team. They're also not like amazing in the paint, but they get a lot of shots in the paint. So you're getting a lot more high volume shots. There's like it's just different numbers in the formula that creates your offense, right? And it would be great if the Nuggets are like getting free throws right now. And like I said, Russ had that one game where he made all of his, but our guys don't always make all of theirs. And that's kind of annoying. Like Julian and
I
MPJ are
think
shooting like less than 80% from the free
I
throw
think
line.
Russ missed all of them in against the Jazz.
Oh my gosh. But the free throw percentages need to be better. Like Jamal is the only one shooting like 90% from the line, which is fine. Christian is actually shooting a lot better from the free throw line than I expected. I really wanted to see that go up. Maybe that goes part and parcel with his 3-point shooting getting better and being more confident as well. MPJ is shooting 66% from the free throw line on like 1.5 attempts, but still like
Yeah,
he
it's got to
he
be
should
better.
be an 80+% free throw shooter. Russ is Russ. Like if he can get close to 70, that's fine. And he's at 67 right now. But I think that yeah, free throws are like a focus thing. Julian Strother, 71% from the free throw line. He's not going to get a lot of them, but he needs to make the ones that he gets, right?
Yeah.
That's my thing with the young players. Same with Peyton Watson. It's currently 90%, but he, low volume, all of that stuff. Hit the ones that you get. I don't ever want to see those guys miss both free throws at the line. Like make at
Yeah.
least one, but most of the time you should be making both is the thing. Because like when it comes to AG, He always makes at least one. He's currently shooting 84% at the free throw line. That's the
Yeah,
thing when
that's
it gets
been
to the
really
free
good.
throws. The free throws and the shooting, our worst shooters are shooting the best percentages from three right now as well. You talked about
Yeah.
AG shooting already, but just to put it in numbers, AG is shooting 55% on three, almost 3.5 attempts per game from three.
I know he's just automatic right now. I don't know that'll definitely not hold. Hoping it can be like 35 to 38 or something.
Yeah. Anyway, that's where the Nuggets stand sort of analytically. Was there anything else that you wanted to say about how the current players, like, is anybody who's playing below their
Yeah. I
expectation?
mean, we did talk about Jamal has been playing in an unacceptable manner, I suppose.
I
But yeah,
think you touched on this. I just want to elaborate a little bit.
okay.
The conditioning, I wasn't surprised to hear about, but it hasn't really stood out to me in these games, to be honest. He's actually been moving a lot better than we saw him at the end of last year, and even compared to how he was looking in the summer. But the decision making has been a problem.
Yeah.
We've praised him for being like the best at passing the ball to Jokić, creating angles to do so, and knowing just when to like make that pocket pass. All these things. Teams are kind of playing the pocket pass a little bit more now, so he's had to sometimes either come up with a different pass or like try to take and make a floater. But for example, an example of like I have no idea what Jamal was thinking on this possession. It was in the clutch in the game versus the Nets. And it was an opportunity really for the Nuggets to win that game in regulation, but instead it went to OT. But Jamal waves off Jokić with a seal in the paint. I think he might have had Claxton in the paint there, because maybe the Nets were closing with Claxton, who that was not how they started off the game, and they were playing him with Dorian Finney-Smith, going that whole double big look, but they were like switching Dorian Finney-Smith onto Jamal. Jamal's like, oh, okay, I'll ISO Dorian Finney-Smith and take this tough contested jumper in the clutch, which is like not what their clutch offense looks like, especially in this game. Like what was effective was getting the ball to Jokić. He did
Yeah.
not do that. And it was a disaster. He redeemed himself with the tough reverse layup off the handoff from Jokić that actually tied the game against the Raptors. Well, actually, that was the night before, so he didn't redeem himself, but he did that one good thing in the game versus the Raptors, even though he was really inefficient in that game. But you get these. That's the thing, is you get these flashes of how good Jamal can be,
Yeah.
and you're like, dude, like,
Yeah. I did think he was decent to good in the Clippers game, though. Like him and Jokic were the two best players on our team, and that was more familiar.
he did look better as a scorer in that Clippers game, I will say. Yeah.
Yeah, but like it's still your point remains where, yeah, he just missed open pocket passes, shot selections weird. Which I get that his play style's like that sometimes, where he's taking mid range shots and he just like missed every single one versus the Raptors pretty much.
Yeah.
It's
But
gonna
that's why you
hurt.
pass the ball to Jokic instead of waving him off in the clutch.
I was just staying confident. I thought he had a good season last season, and he was injured in the playoffs and during the Olympics, so I wasn't panicking as much as other people. But I am now officially starting to get my first inkling of worry with Jamal.
An inkling of worry.
An inkling of worry. I'm not like worried yet, but it's my first like, oh, it's starting to build. But right now, I'm
Okay.
still
We should
early
create a
on.
meter for this, for how Will feels about Jamal.
I'm on the first notch of this
Okay.
worry meter. Yeah.
I'm not worried. I'm just annoyed, honestly. I do want the shooting to be better because he's not shooting well, particularly from three. He's also not getting attempts up as we suggested that he should, to help ease the, like, that's the thing, is like Jamal could help the offense by doing one of two things: getting to the rim more, which is actually harder with the spacing that they have now anyway. And also that's not really his strength at this stage, but getting up more 3-point attempts. Like if he was shooting 30%, but he'd been taking like, 6-7 attempts per game, even like 8, because of like how high his usage is. That's one thing. But he is currently sitting at 4.6 attempts per game and shooting 30%. So that's like I'm annoyed that he's not getting more attempts up, and like not worried, but I'm just like, I just want that shot to start falling already. Besides that, like, yeah, he needs to get better on defense, like this, that, and the other. But it's not like, again, like he looks like he's moving well.
Yeah,
It's
I
really
think
just a matter of like playing better.
he's fine on defense, I think, as far as expectations goes for him.
Yeah.
But the
Like I
offense has to
wouldn't
be
like
there.
that's the thing is like we don't care about his defense if his offense is better
Yeah,
than it's been. That's the
right.
thing. Like, and honestly, probably we wouldn't be talking about how bad MPJ's offense has had, or how bad his defense had been if the offense hadn't been so sputtering for the first few games. Because like that's what we need from those guys. Obviously do your part on defense. Don't be like a sieve, but they've been struggling on both ends of the ball. Mike's starting to find his rhythm in that regard. And I hope that when Jamal comes back from concussion protocol, he's able
Yeah.
to establish some rhythm as well.
I'm not going to hold the concussion against him, obviously,
Oh,
as
yeah, no.
some people are. But
He got, dude, I want the audience, anybody who's criticizing Jamal for getting a concussion, to imagine what it would be like if you got bumped in the face by Julius Randle's shoulder. Like
yeah, that
that
was
dude
a
is a
hard
tank.
hit. We haven't talked about the two players that have really been the most mentioned in Nuggets fan trade fantasies, which is Peyton Watson and Dario.
Mm.
Very disappointed in Peyton. I'm pretty, God, it's still early, but my mind is pulling me to have some unfavorable conclusions about him. But I'm trying to resist. There's no denying that if he doesn't start to show some promise, his upside could be used in a trade at some point. But reading that Booth article again, PWat is Booth's guy. Like, he's never going to give him up anyway. So I'm like, I don't even know how useful it is to talk about Peyton being traded. But right now, he is like either not in the right position.
He was playing for last year. He didn't look like this.
That's true. He's like relegated to this catch and shoot player right now.
Or catch and drive.
Yeah, or catch and drive, which he hadn't been doing. He started to a little bit more, and the rim finishing is inconsistent. It's just
Like
everything's looking bad.
Like my thing is that we did this whole song and dance with Zeke also. Like we need to put him in the right position. But Peyton has not shown even like the flashes of impact that I would have hoped to see this early in the season. We talked about this with Swipa. He is coming off of the hamstring injury. He also missed all of preseason. This whole team is trying to find an identity, and these guys are trying to play better with each other. He basically got thrust into playing with these guys for the first time all together in game one versus the Oklahoma City Thunder, which is like not a fun team to do your trial by fire against. And I still think that he's going to need more games before we can really evaluate where he's going to be. I would probably start looking around like game 15. But I will say, I really was hoping to see more, at least flashes of, okay, he's starting to get his legs back under him. Maybe we're going to start to see some of the improvements that he was working on over the summer soon, like feeling that way. But so far, with the exception of like, he looked atrocious defensively in the first game of the season. And I don't think he looked great against the Clippers either. He hasn't looked atrocious defensively, but he also hasn't been making a positive defensive impact. That's something that has really stood out to me, is that I forget he's on the floor sometimes defensively. He hasn't been great as a help defender, in part because a lot of that involves communication. He's a young player. This is something that he struggled with last year as well. But that on top of no longer making the same on-ball impact that he at least used to make in terms of bothering other players is definitely concerning to me. The offense, I mean, I think he looked even more raw than he did at the end of last year.
Yeah.
He had multiple possessions actually yesterday against the Jazz where, Russ drives, kicks out to him, and it's either like catch and shoot three. The shot form doesn't look great. The shot itself, like, misses these aren't close misses, right? Like last year, Julian's a shooter. He's missing even when he's airballing stuff. Things at least look like, okay, he's like, it's different when a shooter shoots and misses than when Peyton shoots and misses, right? And we know he was working on the shot form, but I don't know how consistent the execution of that has been in the game. So that's one thing. The other thing is he's also in catch and drive situations. He had a situation in the Jazz game where he got to catch and drive from the baseline, from the corner, drove along the baseline, and then instead of going up to try to finish through like some contact, definitely, he tries to kick out and ends up turning the ball over. But then I will say later in that same game, and this was like a mixed possession because he ends up on ball, forces a deflection, and he either gets the steal or like Hunter comes in to get the ball after Peyton deflects it. And I'm like, oh, this is great. Like they're gonna run on the break and the Peyton's gonna get this like lob dunk, and we'll get to see that nice two-way sequence. And I don't know if it was just the spacing between the two guys or what. And I don't know if that was Peyton just like deferring to Hunter, because I think Hunter would have been happy to just like toss him the ball back because like that was his deflection and like all of that. But it felt like Peyton just kind of gave him that runway. And that could be like, I'm not like feeling like I have my legs under me, all that stuff. But we at least got to see like, oh, this kid with this, what was it, 7'1", 7'2" wingspan, forcing this deflection on the ball on the perimeter and then creating an extra possession opportunity for us. So that's like something, right? There was also a lot of people have been talking about ways that Peyton could be more directly involved in actions. And there have been albeit scant, but existing examples of them doing that. Like in the Nets game where teams are doing a lot of switching against the bench, especially that's not new. One of the ways that you can beat a switch is with a slip, and Peyton's good at slipping screens. And Russ was able to deliver the pocket pass to Peyton on the slip on this possession, and Peyton was able to finish at the rim. I believe it was over Claxton. It wasn't like a dunk or anything. It was just a nice, like, finish to the play. And that stood in contrast to some of the worst possessions that he's had. That's the thing, is like the bat, because he hasn't been having the big, like, good highlight plays like he did last year. The bad highlights are so loud. Yeah. He had them last year too, but we forgave them because of the stuff that was coming on the opposite side. And one of the things that I talked about is like, he's got to be able to finish at the rim. He's not going to be a good 3-point shooter. He's got to be able to slash and finish at the rim, or, catch lobs and finish at the rim. And we've seen both things happening. I talked about the play where he slips that screen and Russ gets the pass to him and he's able to finish that layup. But there have been, like, for every one of those 3 or 4 where Peyton is like either trying too flashy of a finish in traffic, or just like isn't able to, I don't know, get the lift to get up to the rim, or doesn't know like which angle to use to get the ball into the basket, or whatever it is to finish a play. That is both annoying and concerning, because that was something that I specifically wanted to see better from him on to start the season. Like, how do you feel generally about like where Peyton is relative to just the context of him being out with the hamstring and having this preseason?
Yeah, it's hard to fully evaluate because you either have to understand that he's coming off an injury, and it's difficult to play with new players like Russ and Dario and whoever else is on the bench, and even like playing with the Jamal Murray, who's not playing at his highest level. So then you think about Peyton Watson's development just as a player in himself and what he's capable of. And even if he realizes that, will that be a good fit for this bench unit as it is? So there's like multiple different questions that need to be answered with him. That's a good point. And right now I feel very bad about where he is, but I really like Peyton Watson as a player, or I guess as a person.
You like him as a person?
I like him as a person. Like, he's always very well spoken. I just appreciate him as like a presence on the team. He's very receptive to like learning and like creating a routine, even though Booth did have comments about like him working on his professionalism and stuff like that. I believe that he can get to that point. It's just a matter of hopefully having enough reps and having enough time. I do worry that playing him with Russ is not going to be helpful to his development because it's just putting way too much pressure on him shooting the three at the 35% that Malone's challenging him to get to.
But he's also getting drive opportunities is the thing.
Yeah, which I think you would expect for a young player, even just like CB, and then you just got to finish. And he's struggling with that right now. And, he had the tomahawk dunk that he missed where he's got to like control that a little bit more and just go for
Not
the consistent
tomahawk,
finish. Yeah.
Just finish. Just put the ball
go.
in the basket.
When you're established and you're comfortable, then you can do the crazy dunks. But right now,
there are very few times that I've seen him actually be able to finish that dunk, like in traffic anyway.
Right. So, man, I'm just like wondering what it is that he's offering overall and if he's going to fit on both sides and when we're going to start to see it or not. Because I'm ready to get an answer on him. I'm getting impatient. So
I will say that you talked about is he even going to fit with the bench? This is like, even if we didn't have the injury concern or anything, even if we saw him start to see him have a little bit more improvement on certain aspects of his offense, like the finishing, the fact we need Peyton to become this like all-in-one utility player. I still believe that he's the player that has to raise the ceiling for this team by becoming playable in every context. And if he in particular can't shoot or create offense from the perimeter, which could involve driving, which could involve like a pump fake and then getting to that midi that we saw him be able to get to this season. We've seen him like go to like a floater that like isn't falling right now. I don't know if that's like a thing that he comfortably has in his bag, but he has gone for it and it hasn't been falling. So that's another one. Even if that is true, it creates more limitations for the players that he can play with. That wasn't the case for Bruce Brown, right? Bruce could play with anybody because he's not like a great shooter, but he could drive. He was willing to spot up, like willing to take the shot is the other thing. Peyton has been hesitant, which I think is messing with his form. And we talked about the same thing with Christian in the preseason. It looks a lot different when the guy isn't hesitating. That's just the fact of it, especially for guys that aren't bona fide shooters like Julian, like Mike, where if they start to hesitate, everything like Mike can hesitate and he can still like get that shot off and then cash it, right? I don't even necessarily worry about hesitation with Julian, except maybe the defender closes out. But if he has like time and space, whatever. But if Peyton or Christian hesitate on a shot, I'm like out on it.
yeah.
So that's another, aspect of this is like the confidence aspect. But that's again, just like coming back to it, the reason that Bruce was so valuable is you could play him in so many different lineups. You're a lot more limited with Peyton as well, which is like another reason that he didn't play in that Wolves series in the playoffs, right? It was just a matter of like who fits best with the other guys that we need to have on the floor.
Yeah.
He's Calvin's guy and like all this. And I mostly agree, but I also think that because of how rocky the season has started for the team, and they are starting to find their legs in some respects, the West, it's not going to be easy. And depending on where the team is as we approach the deadline, like some moves are going to need to be contemplated. Let's talk about Dario a little bit. What did you think of Malone benching Dario in the Jazz game after his performance the first 5?
I thought it was really confusing. I don't know what his thought process was. Just because
you thought it was confusing that he benched Dario?
Yeah, because I don't know if he was saying, wow, Dario, you've been so bad, we're benching you. I don't know if he's saying, yeah, get a reset, we'll rest you, and then you can come back after some games and we'll figure something out. I don't know if he just thought DeAndre was going to be better for this Jazz game and just was like, oh, we're winning, this is working, I'm not going to get Dario in. Malone's done that before where he like forgets to put Mike in. Not that he forgot to put Dario in.
I don't think
like,
he forgot to put Dario in.
No, he didn't. But I just think sometimes Malone, all coaches do this where you just kind of like stick with what's going on in the game. And, Dario didn't play, so he not going to put him in. I don't think it's concerning.
Oh,
really.
Like, were you confused that he didn't get garbage time minutes?
No, I'm just confused that he didn't play at all. Like, it just seemed weird. Like, a Jazz is a really shitty team. I think it's time to play Dario and let him like work through some shit. But I was fine watching DJ play. I had some fun watching him play. Obviously Dario's the punching bag of Nuggets Nation right now. He's getting a ton of blame. I feel bad for him. He hasn't done anything yet. I do
Well, that's
like
part of the problem.
yeah, for sure. I just think about the fit with Russ too. Other people have brought this up where it's like if Russ is a guy who has the ball in his hands and is a playmaker, but that's also kind of what Dario's strength is. How's that fit gonna work? And now we're seeing it in real time. And then Dario, it was theoretically supposed to be like a 3-point shooter to put around Russ, and that's not working either. And apparently he's a 4 and not a 5, but we're playing him at the 5. So I don't know what's going on with Dario. We gave him the MLE, so that sucks
That's
because
just like a lot of thoughts, Will.
yeah.
Dario is taking 0.6 threes per game. So I don't actually think that we can judge his shooting because we're not really generating threes for him. A lot more pick and roll instead of pick and pop, but Russ isn't great at passing out on pick and pops, is what I've learned
Yeah.
from this. Like he doesn't get that angle.
He doesn't usually play with pick and pop bigs.
Well, he did
career.
with Tice last year.
How was it successful enough? I don't
Yeah,
know.
the Clippers bench was fine. Like, and those lineups were positive. I think that Dario is like the fact of the matter is Dario like can't make a layup. That's really the problem. Like, yeah, some of Russ's passes to him are like a little crazy, but he also gets the ball to him with and has gotten the ball to him with frequency, and Dario just like hasn't been able to finish at the rim. That's honestly what I think is the biggest problem for him. Swipa has talked about how he like hasn't been able to keep up athletically defensively, but actually, the bench lineups have not been good defensively. So I'm not arguing that either, but I also don't think it's necessarily Dario's fault. Not that he's fixing it, but it's not really like his job to fix it. But I think if he's been able to make his layups, like this just isn't a conversation. But he's not been able to finish at the rim. And that's like, oh, we literally just had this last year with Zeke. Except Dario has more of an excuse because he's not really as athletic as Zeke is. And so I just don't really understand what it is with Zeke. And at least Dario can catch the ball with his hands. Like it doesn't just immediately slip out of his hands, even off of some of these crazy passes from Russ where I'm like, why was there so much sauce on the ball there?
Yeah.
So, that's been an issue. I'm not confused by it. Like Dario hasn't been playing well, and it is a back-to-back versus the Jazz. He's an older player. Malone tried to say as much after the game, and he's always going to go to bat for his guys. So I don't know if he actually means like, oh, Dario's not really the problem. Like he's like part of the problem. Like nobody on the bench has been good, including him. So he's like part of that problem, but
Yeah.
it's not his fault. I know why they gave him the MLE. Like they really wanted him, and they were in competition with Greece, with a EuroLeague team. I always wanted to try to get him on a minimum, but I said it this whole summer. Centers have been getting, in my opinion, like overpaid in that they were getting more than I thought they should go for. And
Yeah.
Dario was one of those.
If Dario was playing like the way we thought he was going to play, then
if Dario was
wouldn't.
making layups, I'd be like, whatever, honestly.
But yeah,
That's
you can't be this bad. And I don't know if it's chemistry with the bench. I don't know if it's Malone is fucking up the bench unit because he's not a good coach, as some are saying. I doubt that that's what it is. But
you don't know that that's what it is or isn't?
No, I mean, I am in Malone's camp. I'm just like, if you're speculating why is Dario not working, is it just because he's washed? Is it because Malone's not coaching him? Is it a roster fit? Is it who knows what it is? I think it might be that he's just not that good anymore. So that sucks for him. And I'm just like, great, we just saddle ourselves with another unplayable contract. So I mean, all I can do is just hope that he figures something out and like knows how to get to his spots. I mean, he is an experienced player.
He's been able to get to his spots. He just hasn't been able to make layups. Like,
yeah, I
this
still.
is the other thing is you're right that we saw him in the preseason. Like, okay, I can see the vision with this. Like they're using him a bit as a post hub, even with Russ on the floor, or they're using him off ball and he's like screening for these off ball actions, or vice versa. Like Russ is screening and Dario's the passing hub, whatever. They haven't been doing any of that since the start of the regular season. And I don't know if that's on Malone or the players. I'm going to go with both. So they need to figure that out because we do have this guy on a 2-year taxpayer MLE, and we don't even have the seconds to try to dump this contract.
Yeah.
So they need to figure out how to make that work. One of the things that people have been clamoring for is play Zeke Nnaji at the 4, this, that, or the other. Well, guess what? That's going to mean fewer minutes for Peyton Watson. So we've seen, like, this is not an easy problem to solve with this roster because of the limitations of all these players. They can't just all play together because of their limitations. It's complicated. They do need to figure it out, but yeah, I don't really have, it's no one like person or player's like fault. Yeah, he's got to figure out how to make layups in Ball Arena.
I think right now I'm just leaning towards, Dario is maybe not an NBA player. He could just be in a slump, and it's a new place. Got to figure out how to play with Russ. We'll see whether it's is just the reality or if it improves over time. But right now he hasn't shown that it's going to work. All right, thanks for listening, listeners. But as we say, many of you who are coming here, over half are not subscribed. So if you just found our show and you like what you hear, consider liking and subscribing because that will help us out a ton. Share, hit the notification bell on YouTube as well. Find us on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. Follow our Instagram and TikTok. It's all under What's in a Game NBA, and our YouTube clip channel. Hopefully we'll come to you next time after some wins, because winning is really fun and losing sucks.